What if the universe isn't broken, but debugged? Imagine for a moment that everything you've ever touched, seen, or known is part of an intricate system, one so seamless that it feels real, concrete, emotional, tangible. You drop a glass and it shatters. The sun rises as it always does, with quiet certainty. But what if just occasionally the system falters? What if a moment slips? A scene repeats, a person duplicates, gravity forgets itself, and the mask of reality lifts for just long enough to reveal the scaffolding beneath. In the quiet shadows of history and the ignored margins of the present, a strange collection of events whispers of such possibilities. These are not tales from folklore, nor the ravings of dreamers. They are accounts, documented, investigated, and in some cases witnessed by dozens of reality itself acting wrong. Time stutters. Objects vanish. Towns revert to previous states. Human beings phase through solid matter. Gravity pauses, and all of it unfolds with the unnerving logic of a corrupted computer program trying to fix itself in real time. Over the next 14 chapters, we will explore 10 of the most confounding anomalies ever recorded. These are not merely mysteries, but breaches in the continuity of what we believe is possible. They defy explanation not because we lack imagination, but because they suggest that the foundational rules of our world are not fixed. They are conditional, adjustable, programmable. Take, for instance, the strange case of a soldier who stepped from one continent to another in the blink of an eye, as if reality copy-pasted him across oceans. Or the small desert town where, for 17 quiet minutes, gravity reduced to a gentle suggestion, letting objects and people float, drift, and hover like dancers in a dream. Elsewhere, entire cities have reset to an earlier configuration, like someone restored a saved version of the world. And some people, just for a while, became copies of themselves, echoing past routines with eerie precision, as though replayed from memory by a system struggling to keep up. We will walk alongside a woman who lived the same day 47 times in a row, each loop bending time around her like a ribbon. We'll peer at a floating island suspended in mid-air, casting shadows yet refusing all logic. We'll listen to the stories of people who vanished mid-conversation, their existence seemingly deleted, and those who watched themselves walk by, twice, in the same moment. Through it all, a pattern emerges. Not one of chaos, but of method. These aren't random supernatural events. They follow rules. Precise durations, symmetrical boundaries, mathematical consistency. They unfold as though reality is running code, and that code sometimes crashes, reroutes, or rewrites itself in full view. If that's true, if we are inside something, what does that mean for consciousness, for choice, for meaning? This series isn't about proving we live in a simulation. It's about the compelling evidence that reality isn't what it seems. That what we take for permanence might be illusion. That sometimes, in rare moments of failure or repair, the system shows its seams. You are about to enter a journey through those seams, not to escape reality, but to understand it more deeply. Welcome to the edge of the known world. Welcome to the glitch. Let us begin. It began with a blink. October 3rd, 1593. Gil Perez, a soldier stationed at the governor's palace in Manila, stood in the muggy Philippine heat, armor heavy on his shoulders. The air shimmered, whether from sun or something stranger, and in a moment of fatigue, he closed his eyes. When he opened them again, everything had changed. He was standing in the Plaza Mayor of Mexico City, 9,000 miles away, with the same musket in hand, the same uniform on his back, and no memory of travel. Just the disorienting feeling that the world had flickered like a candle in wind. Witnesses saw him appear from thin air, mid-stride, as though he'd stepped through an invisible door. To the local authorities, his story was impossible. He was arrested, interrogated. Yet Perez described recent events in Manila. news that wouldn't arrive by ship for months. He spoke of an assassination, of military dispatches, of conversations he could not have known. Months later, when a galleon from the Philippines docked in Veracruz, every detail of Perez's account was confirmed. The ship's crew had last seen him on duty at the palace until the moment he vanished. But it wasn't just the distance that disturbed investigators. It was the way he described the transition. Reality, he said, paused. He felt as if he were in two places at once, Manila and Mexico, simultaneously visible like overlapping reflections. It wasn't teleportation in the way we imagine in science fiction. It was more like a copy-and-paste glitch, seamless, precise, unexplainable. The Spanish Inquisition took the case seriously. Eyewitnesses were interviewed, documents preserved, and while they could find no trickery, no madness, they were left with only one conclusion. Perez had experienced something that defied natural law. Centuries later, researchers revisiting the case noticed something else: mathematical precision. The coordinates of Manila and Mexico City formed a perfect circle route across the globe, like points on a navigational grid. This wasn't randomness. It hinted at an invisible system, operating by rules we can't see. What does it mean to be moved like that, unharmed, unchanged, but utterly displaced? Was it divine intervention, a portal, or something far more mechanical? Perhaps space isn't a continuous fabric, but a database of locations, a system where objects, people, can be indexed, stored, and retrieved. Maybe Perez didn't travel at all. Maybe he was simply accessed in a different directory. In any other century, this would be myth. But today, with our understanding of quantum entanglement, simulation theory, and virtual environments, the language of miracles sounds suspiciously like the vocabulary of programming. Gil Perez did not return to Manila. He lived out his days in Mexico, forever marked by that impossible leap. But his experience remains one of the earliest documented cases of a reality glitch, suggesting that, even in the age of empires and galleons, something behind the veil of space was already misfiring. And if a man could vanish from one continent and reappear in another over 400 years ago, it invites a haunting question. How long has the code been breaking? Or perhaps more unsettling, how often does it happen, unnoticed, unrecorded, corrected before we even realize? The system is not infallible. It just hopes we aren't paying attention. The morning was still, the kind of quiet that makes even the wind hesitate. August 4th, 1909, Taos, New Mexico. Maria Santos stepped into her backyard with a basket of laundry. The sun was just beginning to climb over the Sangre de Cristo Mountains, and the world seemed ordinary. Then she dropped a wet sheet, and it floated, not downward, but up, as though gravity had taken a breath and forgotten to exhale. Within minutes, reports flooded in. Water refused to fall. Cars rocked gently in place, their tires barely touching the ground. Children jumped and didn't come back down. A town fountain sprayed droplets that hung mid-air like glass beads suspended on invisible strings. For exactly 17 minutes, gravity paused. Dr. Richard Morrison, a visiting physicist, happened to be in Taos. He conducted impromptu experiments, dropping stones, timing their descent. He calculated that gravity had been reduced to about 15% of its normal strength. Not absent, but eerily light, like the moon had moved closer and rewritten the rules. The phenomenon was recorded. Photographs, 8mm film, even a local television crew, originally in town for an archaeology piece, captured floating papers, drifting hats, and a cameraman swearing in disbelief as his tripod began to levitate. And then, as suddenly as it began, it stopped. Everything fell, dishes shattered, people stumbled, birds that had glided with unnatural grace plummeted like pebbles. The sound of a town crashing back to Earth rang out like an exclamation point on a sentence no one understood. The anomaly had boundaries, measurable ones, a circle exactly 2 miles in radius, centered on the town plaza. Beyond it, the world remained obedient to Newton and Einstein. Inside it, reality had glitched. The government arrived within hours. They took the film reels, the reports, the eyewitnesses. Theories were offered: earthquakes, gas leaks, collective hallucination, but none could explain the footage of a hammer hovering midair or the bruises left by the fall when gravity remembered itself. What happened in Taos wasn't just strange, it was structured, timed, localized, as though someone or something ran a quick test, adjusting a single parameter, gravity, and once the test was over, the system reset. We're used to thinking of physical laws as immutable. Gravity, after all, is a constant. It grounds us, literally and metaphorically. To witness it falter is to feel the floor vanish beneath our understanding. But maybe gravity isn't a law. Maybe it's a setting. What if the universe is more like software than substance, capable of being patched, tweaked, or temporarily suspended? And what if that day in Taos wasn't a malfunction at all, but a rehearsal? A moment when the architects of this reality flipped a switch, watched what happened, and logged the results. The people of Taos went on with their lives. The story became folklore, the evidence buried beneath bureaucracy. But for 17 minutes, they lived in a world where the rules didn't apply. And once you've seen the rules break, it's hard to believe they were ever real in the first place. How many more parameters are adjustable? How many have already been changed? And what would it take for us to notice again? It started like every other Tuesday. March 15th, 2011. Jennifer Kumar's alarm rang at 6:23 a.m. The sky outside was a soft gray, her coffee brewed the same, her commute predictable. But as the hours passed, a creeping sense of déjà vu began to weigh on her. By evening, it felt overwhelming, and when she awoke the next morning to the same song, the same light, the same minute on the clock, she knew something was wrong. Jennifer Kumar lived the same day 47 times. At first, she believed she was dreaming or losing her mind, but each loop retained consistency. People said the same things, traffic patterns repeated. Her co-workers moved like actors following a script. Eventually, she began testing the day, keeping detailed notes, and the world responded with eerie precision. By loop 12, she predicted the exact moment a car crash would occur. She reported it in advance. Police laughed, then the accident happened, exactly as described. As the loops progressed, Jennifer changed. She began to learn Italian, calculus, Morse code. What she retained carried forward. The day rewound, her memory did not. She was evolving within a frozen frame. On loop 23, she convinced a small team at the local university to help her study the anomaly. Physics professor Dr. Sarah Chen believed her. Together, they placed sensors, took readings, and noticed something strange. Reality wasn't just repeating, it was buffering. During loop 31, Jennifer found she could influence the timing. By concentrating, she could stretch lunch to feel like hours, or shrink meetings into seconds. Reality bent to her attention, compressing or expanding with subjective effort. Then came loop 45. Jennifer wasn't alone. She met Frank Rodriguez, an elderly man trapped in the same repeating Tuesday, his third time through. Their meeting wasn't just coincidence. It was convergence. As they exchanged experiences, they realized the loop was expanding, pulling more people into its orbit like a slow-motion whirlpool. On the 47th loop, they decided to act. Through trial and error, intuition, and hypothesis, they performed a sequence of choices, almost like inputs in a code. A reset switch hidden in behavior. And it worked. Jennifer awoke on Wednesday, March 16th. The world had moved forward, But the memories, every second of those 47 days, remained. Dr. Chen's final report described it as a localized temporal anomaly. But beneath the jargon was a chilling truth. Time might not be linear. It might be structured like a loop of code, a function that, when corrupted, replays until the right sequence breaks the cycle. Jennifer had not dreamed. She had debugged. The implications ripple outward. If time can loop, what is it responding to? A fault in the system? An error in the save file? Or something else? An intentional design? A chance for correction? A controlled environment where outcomes are tested, refined, and, when necessary, repeated. We often ask, what would you do with one more day? But what if the question is, what does the system expect you to do with it? Jennifer Kumar's story isn't just about repetition, it's about discovery. That beneath the ticking hands of every clock there might be a waiting process, a loop, paused, watching, listening. And if time can be rewritten, who, if anyone, is writing the script? June 12, 2003, Millbrook, Illinois. A small town where nothing ever really changed until everything did. It began with a librarian. Rebecca Martinez glanced out the window of her quiet workplace and saw herself walk by. Same clothes, same gait, same subtle limp from a sprained ankle weeks earlier. At first, she thought it was a reflection, but the angle was wrong. She rushed outside and found her copy inside the building, shelving books. The duplicate looked at her, nodded, and continued working. By nightfall, Millbrook was in chaos. People were seeing themselves everywhere, mowing lawns, shopping for groceries, eating dinner. Identical voices, mannerisms, memories. These weren't hallucinations or long-lost twins. They were perfect replicas. Tom Bradley confronted his other self 3 blocks from home. Sarah Winston bumped into her duplicate in the bakery, both buying the same loaf of bread. Medical scans revealed no differences. Fingerprints, DNA, even scars were the same. The duplicates answered intimate personal questions with flawless accuracy. What made it more chilling? They were completely unaware that anything was wrong. The duplicates weren't clones. They were echoes, replays. Researchers arrived. Dr. Michael Ross, a quantum physicist, studied the phenomenon and discovered a disturbing pattern. Every duplicate was appearing exactly 24 hours behind their original's movements. Wherever you had been the day before, that's where your double would be now, reenacting your past like a program reloading cached data. The duplicates interacted with the world, responded to touch, cast shadows. But they were slightly delayed. Every action was mirrored 4.7 seconds after the original. If you picked up a cup, your duplicate would pick it up 4.7 seconds later. A flicker, a lag like a playback buffer catching up. Attempts to separate original and copy caused disorientation. Both experienced memory fragmentation, as though their minds were tethered. Then, just as suddenly as they had appeared, the duplicates vanished. After 6 days, they flickered and dissolved like static, leaving only silence behind. Video footage caught the moment, hundreds of people fading like corrupted graphics in a video game, their pixels collapsing into nothingness. Government agents swept in. Witnesses relocated. Files sealed. But what had happened couldn't be fully hidden. And those who saw it knew this was no ordinary glitch. It wasn't supernatural. It was systematic. The Millbrook duplicates acted like a visual error in a simulation, a rendering issue where character models appeared twice, a buffering hiccup in a system managing too many variables. Or perhaps the system was rewinding, cross-checking its data. A double exposure of yesterday over today. And that raises a question with no comforting answer. What if we are recorded? What if every day we live is saved, cached, and occasionally, without warning, replayed? Maybe your past self still lingers somewhere in the system, waiting in an old file. Not gone, just waiting to be rendered again. The people of Millbrook were never quite the same. How could they be? Once you've watched yourself from the outside, watched your memories wear someone else's face, you can never quite trust the mirror again. Who's real? And who's just yesterday's version, looping until the system decides to let go? It was supposed to be just another flight. September 23, 1997. Captain David Chen guided Flight 407 on its familiar route from Seattle to Los Angeles. At 30,000 feet, the sky stretched clear, blue, uneventful, until it wasn't. At 1:14 p.m., Chen and his crew saw land, above them. A massive island hovered in the sky, floating impossibly at cruising altitude. The size of Manhattan, it was complete with trees, roads, buildings. Smoke curled from chimneys. Tiny figures moved between structures. It wasn't a cloud. It wasn't a mirage. It was real. Passengers gasped. Cameras clicked. A flight attendant wept. Chen radioed air traffic control. Nothing on radar. Nothing on satellite. The skies were clear. But the island remained, solid, unmoving, casting a shadow on the cloud layer below. Through binoculars, Chen could make out startling details. Cultivated fields, medieval-style buildings, even people walking slowly, as if strolling through a quiet village park. One figure waved, others pointed at the plane. In disbelief, Chen altered course for a closer view. At 2 miles out, passengers described rooftops, bridges, even livestock. It was a self-contained world suspended in the air. And then, just as they approached, it vanished. Not slowly, instantly, as if someone had hit delete. 2 F-16s scrambled to the location minutes later. They found only empty sky. No turbulence, no debris. Just clean air where a floating continent had been. But the glitch left scars. Flight 447's instruments began malfunctioning during the encounter. Altitude readings conflicted, suggesting the plane was simultaneously above and below sea level. GPS coordinates flickered. The nav system registered the aircraft in multiple locations at once. The anomalies ended precisely when the island disappeared. Passenger photos and video footage were later analyzed. No signs of manipulation. Just raw, unnerving evidence of a landmass where no land should be. Experts tried to explain it away. Optical illusions, temperature inversions, mass hysteria. But none of those account for shadows, structural movement, or synchronized eyewitness testimony from dozens of trained crew and passengers. A report leaked years later suggested similar sightings had occurred. Floating islands seen by pilots, vanishing before military jets could respond. Always transient, always impossible, always noticed. If the Earth is real, firm, consistent, how does a city float 30,000 feet in the air? Unless it's not a glitch in physics. But in rendering, maybe the island wasn't supposed to be visible. Maybe it was part of another layer, a different instance of the world, accidentally loaded into ours. A debug asset rendered in the wrong build. A parallel zone clipped into our sky, then removed before it could destabilize the environment. In a computer game, developers can fly through unfinished areas. Test maps used to simulate functionality. Perhaps this was one. The people on the island looked up. They saw us. What if they weren't surprised? What if they were observing us, the same way we were observing them? Flight 447 landed safely in Los Angeles. Its passengers changed forever. Most never spoke publicly. A few did, but their voices were quickly dismissed or forgotten. But the island left an impression, a reminder that sometimes, up in the clouds, the boundaries between worlds blur. And maybe, just maybe, the sky doesn't stop at the atmosphere. It stops at the edge of whatever layer we've been programmed to see. December 14, 2005, Grand Central Terminal, New York City. the heart of movement, noise, and steel. A place where people rush, collide, and never stop. Except for John Stevenson. At precisely 4:09 p.m., he walked through a marble pillar. Not around, not beside, through. 30 eyewitnesses froze in collective disbelief. Port Authority Officer Maria Rodriguez, just feet away, saw him pass through solid stone as effortlessly as smoke. Security footage confirmed it. No tricks, no edits. One moment, Stevenson approached the column. The next, his torso vanished into marble. Then his legs. Then nothing. A breath later, he stepped out the other side. He was uninjured, confused but calm. His heartbeat normal, his voice steady, but his words unsettled everyone. It felt like walking through gelatin, thick, slow, but not painful. I could see the steel bars inside, glowing. He described seeing the inside of the pillar, its rebar, wires, and hollow cavities, as if they were translucent. Time, for him, had slowed. He felt suspended between states. Not here. Not quite there. Dr. Patricia Kim of Columbia University analyzed the footage. Her report was blunt. This violates the Pauli exclusion principle. Solid matter cannot share space with other solid matter. And yet it had. Further investigation uncovered something stranger. The pillar itself had been behaving oddly. Maintenance crews noted odd flickers, moments when the surface shimmered or softened. Instruments detected untraceable electromagnetic fields in the area. For weeks, something had been wrong. After the incident, scanners picked up residual energy around Stevenson's body, subtle but persistent, like an afterimage of a digital glitch. He reported dreams of walls breathing, objects phasing, rooms shifting around him. And worse, he still felt the pillar. Across the city, blocks away, he'd sense it behind him, as if a part of him remained embedded in the stone. The marble column was sealed off, the area scrubbed, but whispers remained. Scientists offered no satisfying answers. Quantum tunneling? Impossible at that scale. Hallucination? Not with footage from 4 separate angles. The only theory left is unsettling. Maybe solid matter isn't truly solid. Maybe it only renders that way under normal conditions, and occasionally, briefly, it fails. Like a video game object that loses collision data, a structure that forgets to be solid. John Stevenson didn't break the laws of physics. The laws forgot to apply to him. What does that mean for the rest of us? If reality is built from code, rules that simulate solidity, resistance, density, then a glitch like this reveals more than an error. It exposes the mechanism, the machinery underneath the illusion of permanence. We believe we're anchored by the material world, that a wall is a wall. But maybe it's just a suggestion. And if that suggestion wavers, just for a moment, we can fall through, or pass through, and never be quite whole again. 3:17 a.m., November 8, 2012, Cedar Falls, Iowa. A town not known for headlines. A place where time ambled gently forward until, without warning, it went backward. It began at the local hospital. A demolished wing, reduced to rubble the day before, was suddenly whole again. Lights flickered inside. Medical equipment, desks, patient charts, even coffee cups left half full, sat precisely where they had 24 hours earlier. The demolition tape? Gone. By dawn, the entire town had reverted. Buildings returned to prior states. Construction sites became vacant lots. Cars reappeared in old parking spots. Trash that had been cleaned was back on the streets. Houses freshly painted the day before wore their old coats again, weathered and familiar. Sarah Mitchell, a real estate agent, had painted her home green on November 7th. That morning it was blue, not just blue again, chemically identical to its previous paint layer. Same aging, same flaking, same subtle scuff above the door. People were stunned, confused, some terrified. Then came the digital anomalies. City files updated the day before reverted to older versions. Emails vanished. Bank transactions undone. Even injuries healed. Bandages fell away to reveal wounds that had simply never happened. Dr. Jennifer Walsh, a temporal physicist from the University of Iowa, was called in. Her analysis was chilling. "This isn't time travel," she wrote. "This is a rollback, a version control reset." Her team found that the entire area, down to plants, insects, and electrical currents, had been restored to its exact state from the morning of November 7th, but only within Cedar Falls. Neighboring Waterloo remained unchanged. The dividing line was precise. One side a newly poured sidewalk, the other cracked concrete that hadn't existed the day before. The split was perfect, clean, digital, as if someone had drawn a box around the town and pressed undo. Locals reported feelings of disorientation. Some experienced déjà vu. Others remembered both timelines, as if two conflicting memories were playing over one another. One woman swore she had buried her dog on the 7th. On the 8th, the dog was alive again, sleeping in its bed. Government agents arrived quickly. Statements were taken. But the explanations, seismic misalignment, gas leaks, mass hallucination, fell flat in the face of overwhelming physical evidence. Then reports surfaced of other towns, small isolated communities, experiencing the same thing. Always at 3:17 a.m., always a 24-hour reset. As if the system managing reality was restoring from a backup. Maybe it was a correction, a patch, a rollback after an error. We think of time as a line, one direction, one chance. But this event suggests something different. That time, like a file, can be saved, reverted, controlled. Cedar Falls had not traveled in time. It had been restored, as if the universe pressed revert to last known good configuration. And that's what haunts most who live through it. Because if this was a fix, what was the bug? What happened on November 7th that required a reset? And more importantly, who decides when the system needs to start over? Perhaps we're not just living in time. Perhaps we're being managed by it. April 22nd, 2008. Bakersfield, California. At 2:30 p.m., Maria Santos noticed the Kern County Museum shimmer. The stucco walls flickered, not with light, but with absence. They became transparent, exposing structural beams and wiring as glowing lines, like someone had peeled back the skin of reality. The building was still there, but it looked drawn. Within the hour, a 4-block radius around downtown entered what would later be called the rendering error. Buildings turned into wireframes, transparent outlines pulsing with soft digital glow. Cars lost their paint and texture, revealing vector shells. Even people, briefly, terrifyingly, flickered into forms that showed not skin but skeletal and vascular grids, as if reality was displaying a debug mode never meant to be seen. Photographer Alex Chen documented it all. His images, untouched by software, show a downtown reduced to digital anatomy. Streets looked like untextured game environments. Windows floated as transparent planes. People's arms became lattices of glowing polygons moving in slow arcs of disbelief. But it wasn't hallucination. People could still walk into buildings. Doors functioned. Phones rang. Sound continued normally. The world had visually broken, but its physics had not. Dr. Robert Kim from UC Berkeley reviewed the images and issued a startling assessment. The wireframes followed the conventions of 3D modeling software. These weren't arbitrary patterns. They were structured, mathematical, coherent. It's as if, he said, we're seeing the scaffolding beneath the world. The error spread outward in clean concentric circles before stopping. Then, at 3:17 p.m., Exactly 47 minutes after it began, everything snapped back. Buildings regained solidity, streets retextured, faces returned. And in that instant, witnesses reported a strange sound, not like a glitch, but like a breath, a soft inhale from something enormous and unseen. No official explanation ever emerged. The event was blamed on electromagnetic interference, but nothing accounted for the geometric regularity, the matching timing, the precision of the error, and perhaps most disturbing of all, the hidden details revealed during the glitch. Some buildings showed support structures that didn't match their blueprints. Others had rooms that hadn't existed before. People's flickering anatomy displayed extra pathways, circuits, and networks not found in medical science. It wasn't just a rendering error, it was a reveal. A glimpse into a layer we weren't supposed to see. In video games, developers can toggle wireframe mode to test structure before applying texture. Perhaps that day in Bakersfield, someone toggled the wrong setting. Or maybe we briefly overlapped with another process, a hidden diagnostic running beneath the surface of reality. If this world is a simulation, then its beauty, the trees, the people, the light, may be only surface. A skin wrapped around code that sometimes forgets to stay hidden. We trust our senses to tell us what is real, color, mass, texture. But what happens when those senses show us the bones beneath the world? What happens when the code stutters? And we see not what was meant for us, but what was meant to remain unseen. July 7, 2016, Phoenix, Arizona. A scorching Thursday morning at the Riverside Shopping Mall. Families wandered through food courts. Teens browsed phone cases. Music echoed from distant speakers. Then, without warning, objects began to vanish. It started subtly. A potted plant in the corner of a bookstore disappeared. No sound, no movement, just gone. A display rack of sunglasses faded next. Then an entire bench, as if the pixels it was made of had been deleted. Within minutes, the effect escalated. Tables in the food court blinked out. Trash cans vanished mid-use. Shoppers gasped as merchandise disappeared from their hands. And some saw people vanish. Security guard Robert Martinez stood watch as the mall dissolved around him. It was like watching reality get erased, he later said, like someone was cleaning up a file, deleting things in order. Video footage confirmed it. Objects disappeared edge first, in layers, like computer memory being systematically cleared. Security cameras recorded gaps in their footage, missing people, missing structures. And what remained adjusted itself. Floor tiles rearranged to cover holes where fountains once stood. Shelves slid inward to fill gaps left by vanished goods. The entire mall flexed and rewrote itself like code autocorrecting after a deletion. Dr. Angela Foster, a quantum physicist from Arizona State University, arrived mid-event. She documented the despawn in real time, noting that deletions followed a clear hierarchy. Decorative items first, then non-essential furniture, then less trafficked structural elements. Always peripheral to central, always efficient. At 2:17 p.m., the effect stopped. Nearly 40% of the mall had been erased. But the aftermath was stranger. No one could name the people who had disappeared. No missing persons reports were filed. Records adjusted themselves. Inventory logs showed no discrepancies. Store databases reflected only what still existed. It was as if the missing items and people had never been there. Reality hadn't just deleted them, it had forgotten them. Further analysis revealed that the disappearances followed a grid, blocks of space cleared as though following digital memory units. A mall rendered in chunks, optimized for performance, clearing itself like a device running out of RAM. It wasn't random, it was maintenance. What if the simulation we inhabit, if that's what it is, occasionally clears space the way a computer closes background tabs? Deleting what isn't needed to preserve what is. A form of garbage collection run by a system whose logic we can't perceive. Most unsettling wasn't what vanished, but how seamlessly everything adjusted. Reality filled in the blanks without hesitation. No rupture, no panic. Just silence. In the weeks that followed, shoppers returned. New furniture replaced what had been lost. People laughed again, but the mall felt different. Emptier, echoing, like a room that had once been full of life, now tidied for someone else. And in quiet corners, some swore they remembered things that weren't there anymore. A sculpture, a familiar face. A moment just on the edge of recall. But no one could prove it. No one ever can after a deletion. That's how the system works. It doesn't just erase. It heals over the whole, leaving only a question. What did we lose? Before we knew it was gone? March 3, 2019. Burlington, Vermont. Snow melted slowly on the sidewalks, the last breath of winter fading. College student Emma Rodriguez walked downtown, earbuds in, half listening to a podcast, until she noticed something that made her stop mid-stride. People were looping. A businessman checked his watch at the same corner every 12 minutes. A woman window shopped with robotic precision, repeating the same comments to strangers. In the park, an old man fed pigeons in perfect rhythm, hand to bag, bag to birds, again and again. At first, Emma thought it was coincidence, but the loops continued, too precise, too scripted. So she documented. Within hours, she'd charted over 200 individuals exhibiting NPC behavior, non-player character patterns, predictable movements, repetitive dialogue, limited awareness, like background characters in a video game following invisible tracks. Dr. Sarah Chen, a behavioral psychologist, joined the investigation. Her team discovered something alarming. The affected individuals responded to questions with stock phrases. I'm just enjoying the day. Isn't the weather nice? Always the same words, same tone, same vacant smile. EEG scans showed synchronized neural activity across subjects, unusual harmony among unrelated individuals. Their brains pulsed with identical rhythms, not found in any known state of consciousness. Security footage revealed even more. The NPCs avoided one another with unnatural precision. Their paths never collided, no hesitation, no randomness. They moved like code, executing collision avoidance algorithms. The glitch lasted 6 days. Then, without fanfare, the patterns broke. The loop stopped. People blinked, stretched, yawned, resumed normal life, unaware of what had transpired. When shown footage of their robotic selves, they responded with confusion. That's not me? I don't remember that. Some cried, others laughed it off, but something had happened, and it wasn't isolated. Other towns, college communities across New England, reported the same phenomenon. Always 6 days, always similar proportions of the population affected, always the same eerie choreography. What could cause hundreds of people to become puppets? One theory stands out: resource allocation. In complex simulations, background characters are simplified to conserve processing power. Their behavior is looped, dialogue minimized, autonomy suspended until needed. What if reality does the same? What if, when the system is overwhelmed, it streamlines its load by converting portions of the population into NPCs, temporarily? And if that's true, who decides who becomes simplified? We comfort ourselves with the belief that we are conscious, that we are always aware. But what if consciousness flickers? What if we lose ourselves not in sleep, but in runtime decisions, turned off like a light, then rebooted when the system allows? The Burlington glitch didn't show us broken people. It showed us a broken pattern, A moment when the veil of autonomy slipped, revealing the script beneath the skin. It forces a terrible question. If you were an NPC for 6 days, would you know? And more importantly, are you sure it's not happening again right now? October 3rd, 1593. August 4th, 1969. March 15th, 2011. These dates and the impossible events they mark seemed unrelated at first. Scattered across centuries and continents, they felt like isolated oddities, glitches without a pattern. But then the pattern began to speak. What unites these anomalies isn't superstition. It isn't myth. It's structure. Teleportation that follows geometrical precision. Gravity that shuts off inside a perfect circle. A town that rewinds itself to a previous save point at the exact same time of night. Looped days, repeated people, invisible rendering systems, all obeying rules, boundaries, durations, hierarchies. Not chaos. Code. Even the visual anomalies, like Bakersfield's wireframe world, follow logic used in 3D modeling. The despawn event in Phoenix matched memory-clearing algorithms. The floating island, a misplaced asset in the sky. A debug object visible only when the layers misalign. Each incident, bizarre as it is, mirrors the same core idea. Reality doesn't behave randomly when it breaks. It behaves systematically, as if something is managing the experience. We've spent centuries asking, what is the universe made of? Maybe the better question is, how is it run? And perhaps the most haunting realization isn't that glitches happen, but that they seem to be happening more often. Across the last few decades, the frequency of anomalies, documented, reported, sometimes quietly erased, has increased. Reset towns, vanishing objects, NPC events, duplicate people, not folklore, not dreams, evidence. And if this is a simulation, if reality is more like a living program than a stable cosmos, then something is changing. Perhaps the system is under strain, updating, reformatting. Or perhaps it's being watched, tested, altered from outside. There's even a theory, among those who study these events, that we've passed some threshold, that our understanding of technology, our proximity to simulation theory, quantum computing, artificial intelligence, has started to echo back into the code itself. As if the simulation, sensing that its inhabitants are catching on, has begun to adjust more aggressively, or break more often. But there is another possibility, one more unsettling than all the rest. What if these are not glitches? What if they are not accidents at all? What if they're messages, not from a god or a higher power, but from the system itself? A language made of interruption, a method of contact where words would fail. If our world is digital, then crashes, pauses, and resets may not be failures. They may be the only way the program can speak to us. Like an eye blinking open for just a second, like a whisper in code saying, "You are not alone in here." And so we gather these stories not as entertainment, not as anomalies, but as fragments of something larger. A pattern still forming. A truth still hiding. The next part of this journey is not about more glitches. It's about what they reveal, and who or what might be watching them with us. The simulation isn't breaking. It's trying to be seen. We often imagine the end of the world as loud, but sometimes it begins in silence. In the early hours of a Sunday morning, a technician at a regional satellite office noticed something strange, a data anomaly spreading through archived surveillance footage. It began subtly, frames missing here and there, timestamp glitches, then entire sequences gone, erased. In each instance, the footage had captured one of the glitches we've explored. John Stevenson walking through marble, the Taos gravity event, the Burlington loops. But the video files weren't corrupted. They were overwritten, restored to show nothing unusual. Empty plazas, quiet parks, blank skies. The system wasn't just hiding its mistakes, it was cleaning them. An automated process had begun, one not triggered by human hands. Something in the simulation, whatever it is, had started erasing the footprints. At first, researchers thought it was censorship, but then a darker theory emerged. What if the simulation is correcting not just the present, but the past, rewriting history itself, not just documents or footage, but memory, perception, consequence, not to deceive, to stabilize? One by one, people who had lived through anomalies began to forget. Not suddenly, but gradually. A dream fading after waking. One man who had seen the floating island couldn't remember why he had taken the photograph still framed in his home. A woman who had once spoken to her duplicate found herself doubting it had ever happened. The simulation wasn't just glitching. It was healing, but not for our benefit, for its own. Think of a video game that crashes. You reboot. You return to your save point. The corrupted data is discarded. The unstable behavior logged and fixed. The illusion resumes. We may believe our memories are solid, that our stories, our pasts, are ours to keep. But what happens when even memory is just another variable? If the simulation can rewrite time, delete people, undo entire towns, what's left of what we call real? Perhaps that's the final revelation. Not that we're living in a simulation, but that we always have been. That birth, death, emotion, love, all of it, are part of the design. Not illusions, but structures. Not fake, but coded. And the glitches? They were never errors. They were thresholds, points where the system faltered, not because it was broken, but because it reached the edge of what it could hide. Every skipped frame, every repeated day, every impossible moment was a knock on the glass. And now we are starting to hear it. The simulation is trying to forget, but we are trying to remember. We are the memory glitch it can't erase. And in that fracture, something extraordinary waits to be seen. We arrive now at the edge of knowing. 10 anomalies, 14 reflections, countless questions. Each story a fissure in the wall of what we assume is reality. They began as isolated incidents, oddities, folklore, data points. But taken together, they form a kind of map, not of geography, but of awareness. This is not just about glitches. It's about glimpses. Glimpses into a structure behind the curtain, a scaffolding beneath sensation. Patterns too precise, too consistent, too technological to be dismissed as chance. Teleportation without transit. Towns reset like saved files. People rendered twice. Physics paused, skipped, or forgotten. Scenes displayed in wireframe. Actions looping like corrupted scripts. These aren't myths. They are logs, system reports from a world built on rules we didn't write. And if this is a simulation, we are not its designers. The code is older than our understanding. Its architecture deeper than our science. But we are not without agency. In fact, we may be its most unpredictable variable. Because amid all the glitches, one thing keeps emerging: consciousness. It is the observer that notices the loop, the librarian who sees her double, the pilot who records the island, the woman who lives one day again and again and chooses to wake the next morning changed. If the simulation is trying to remain hidden, then consciousness is its mirror. A mirror that, once turned toward the code, begins to reflect more than what's on the surface. Perhaps the true nature of these anomalies is not to alarm us, but to invite us, to awaken curiosity, to prod us out of complacency, to remind us that even in the most ordinary moment, something extraordinary may be watching, waiting, rendering. And maybe, just maybe, these glitches are not signs of collapse, but of evolution, a system learning from itself, or learning to let go. We do not know who built this reality, or why, but we know this: it is imperfect, And in that imperfection lies our window, our chance to ask, to seek, to listen, to wonder not just what is real, but what is possible. We may never find the answer, not fully, but perhaps the question is enough, to live aware, to walk gently, to question the light. Because somewhere in the code, buried deep in the structure of space, time, memory, and being, something left the door ajar. And for those who choose to see it, reality is no longer a wall, but a threshold. The simulation may forget, but we remember, and remembering, we begin to see.